Rory McIlroy boycotts. Brian Rolapp's emergency 2028 postseason meeting and players erupt. This isn't clickbait. This is the deepest fracture in professional golf since the LIV war. The world number 2 and 4-time major champion just refused to attend his new CEO's emergency meeting. Brian Rolapp called it, and Rory McIlroy said no. The locker room is now choosing sides. And honestly, the pure arrogance of it makes me furious. Regular working people are struggling to afford a single round of golf, yet these country club elites are revolting because their precious Scottish Open might get a smaller field. It is a complete disconnect, proving these spoiled athletes care about nothing but their own comfort. But look past the outrage. These players aren't just spoiled, they are terrified. They realize this postseason restructuring is a brilliant power grab designed to shift all the control away from the players and directly into the hands of a new CEO who answers to nobody but the board. Let me show you what Rolapp is actually doing and why Rory just threw the first punch in a war that could tear the tour apart. Personally, I think Rory did the right thing by refusing to show up. Do you agree? Or do you think he should have attended and fought from the inside? Drop it below. And if you want the real story behind this boycott that nobody else is telling you, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. So what exactly did Rory McIlroy just say no to? That's the question everyone in the golf world is asking right now. And the answer isn't simple. It starts with a man you might not have heard of yet, Brian Rolapp. He arrived in 2026 as the new CEO of the PGA Tour, coming straight from the NFL, where he learned how to package sports for television, and he brought a very specific vision with him. He said the tour needed to change. He said the product needed to be more exciting for fans. He said the old way of doing things wasn't working anymore. Then he formed a committee, the Future Competition Committee, and he put Tiger Woods in charge of it. Think about that for a second. Tiger Woods, the man who built the modern era of golf, is now the one designing its future. For a lot of fans, that sounded like good news. Tiger has always been about competition, about pushing the game forward. But when Rolapp stood on the stage at the Travelers Championship in June 2026 and started explaining what the committee had come up with, the reaction wasn't what anyone expected. There was no applause, no celebration, just silence. And then, a week later, the first cracks started to appear. The first voice to break the silence wasn't just any voice, it was Rory McIlroy. McIlroy had been one of the first to publicly support the committee's work. He said the right things. He stood next to Tiger and smiled for the cameras. But something changed in the weeks after that announcement. McIlroy started talking differently. He started using words like concerned and worried. And then in July, he did something that surprised everyone. He went public with a warning. He looked directly at Tiger Woods and the tour executives and said, "Be careful, be careful." Not, "I don't like this." Not, "I have some suggestions." Be careful. That's the language of someone who sees a disaster coming and is trying to stop it before it's too late. But what exactly was he warning against? That's where this story gets interesting. The meeting McIlroy refused to attend, the emergency postseason meeting Rolapp called, was supposed to finalize the details of the 2028 plan. Every player knew the meeting was coming, but most of them didn't know what would be discussed behind closed doors. And when Rolapp sent out the invitations, something about the tone of that message made McIlroy pause. He didn't say yes. He didn't say maybe. He said no. And when the news broke that the world number 2 was boycotting an emergency meeting called by his own CEO, the phone started ringing. Players started calling each other. Agents started calling their clients. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. What is Rolapp actually trying to push through? Because whatever it was, it had just made Rory McIlroy, the most measured and careful voice in the game, draw a line in the sand. That was the moment the tour changed forever. McIlroy didn't just say no to a meeting. He said no to a direction. He said no to a vision. And that single no opened a door that nobody in golf was ready to walk through. Because once Rory refused, other players started asking themselves the same question. Why are we supposed to trust this plan? To understand how we got here, you need to go back to the very beginning. Back to the day Brian Rolapp first sat down in the commissioner's office and started drawing up his plan. Rolapp's background isn't in golf. He spent years at the NFL, building billion-dollar television deals. He knows how to make money. And when the PGA Tour hired him, they hired him for exactly that reason. They needed someone who could compete with the Saudi-backed LIV Golf, someone who could turn the tour into a global entertainment product. Rolapp looked at the current system and saw inefficiency. Too many tournaments, too many players. Not enough star power concentrated in one place, so he designed a new structure. The tour announced it in June 2026. The reforms would start in 2028, and they would change everything. The biggest change was the split. The tour would be divided into two separate tiers. The top tier would be a smaller, exclusive group with massive prize money. The second tier would be for everyone else, the rookies, veterans, and players trying to break through. At first glance, this might not sound terrible. A merit-based system where the best players play each other more often, that's what fans want, right? But here's where it gets complicated. The two tiers would run parallel schedules, and players in the top tier would be actively discouraged, if not outright prevented, from playing in the second tier events. In other words, once you're in the elite group, you can't just decide to play a tournament you love because it's part of the second tier. For most players, this was already concerning. But for Rory McIlroy, it was a direct hit to something he cared about deeply. Because some of the tournaments that meant the most to him, tournaments with history, with tradition, with national identity, were at risk of being pushed into that second tier. Rory McIlroy has never been afraid to speak his mind, but he's also never been reckless. Every time he's spoken out in the past, about LIV Golf, about the PGA Tour's slow response, about the need for change, he's been careful, measured, calculated. So when he started using words like concerned and worried in July 2026, people in the golf world took notice. What made him worried? The Scottish Open. For McIlroy, the Scottish Open isn't just another event. It's personal. He's been playing it for years. He's won it. It's the warm-up for the Open Championship, the last stop before the biggest major of the year. But more than that, it's a national open. It carries a title that means something. It's not just a tournament, it's a championship. And when Rolapp's plans started to take shape, McIlroy realized that the Scottish Open could be relegated to the second tier. That would mean something devastating. Players in the top tier would be banned from playing it. Think about that for a second. A national Open Championship, an event with more than a century of history, would no longer have the best players in the world competing in it. Because a new CEO decided it didn't fit his system. McIlroy didn't just hear a rumor and get upset. He saw the draft plan. He saw the list of tournaments being classified as second tier. He saw the Scottish Open on that list. And that's when he went public. In July 2026, McIlroy stood in front of the media and said something that shocked everyone. He said the tour needed to be careful. He said that if the Scottish Open was relegated, it would no longer be a true national open. He said that you can't call something a national open if only a certain number of players are allowed to compete. He was giving the tour a warning, and he was giving it directly to Tiger Woods. Because Tiger was the chairman of the committee that designed this plan, the man who McIlroy had admired his entire career. McIlroy was essentially telling his idol, "You're making a mistake." That took guts, and it made a lot of people in the locker room sit up and take notice. If Rory McIlroy was willing to publicly criticize Tiger Woods, the most respected player in the history of the sport, then something must be seriously wrong. Brian Rolapp needed to finalize the details of the 2028 postseason plan. He'd already announced the broad strokes in June. Now he needed the players on board. So he called an emergency meeting during the postseason, the very time when players are preparing for the most important tournaments of their year. For Rory, the timing felt deliberate. It felt like Rolapp was trying to push something through when players weren't at their strongest, when they were tired, when they were distracted, when they would be less likely to put up a fight. And then there was the meeting format. Rolapp didn't want a discussion. He didn't want feedback. He wanted a vote. The invitation made it clear. The players would be presented with the final plan, and they would vote on it then and there. No amendments, no changes, no negotiation. Accept it or reject it. But reject it, and you're standing against the tour's new leadership and the most powerful committee in the sport. That's when McIlroy made his decision. He looked at the invitation. He looked at the calendar. He looked at the list of tournaments that would be impacted. And he made a choice that nobody expected. He said no. He wouldn't attend. He wouldn't vote. He wouldn't legitimize a process that he saw as fundamentally broken. The news of his boycott spread through the golf world like wildfire. Within hours, every player on the tour had heard about it, and the phone calls started. Some players supported him. Some players were furious. Some players asked themselves the same question. If Rory is willing to stand up to Rolapp and Tiger, why shouldn't I? When the emergency meeting finally happened, Rory McIlroy wasn't there, and that absence spoke louder than any speech he could have made. But what happened next surprised everyone, because McIlroy wasn't alone. The first player to break ranks publicly was Matt Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick is a major champion. He won the US Open in 2022. He's a Ryder Cup star. He's known as one of the smartest and most thoughtful players on tour. And when he heard about McIlroy's boycott, he didn't just stay quiet and hope it would blow over. He spoke out. Fitzpatrick publicly backed McIlroy's concerns. But he didn't just agree with Rory in general terms. He offered a specific example of what was wrong with the tour's current system and what Rolapp's plan was making worse. He talked about Collin Morikawa. Morikawa, Fitzpatrick pointed out, had gone into the 2024 FedEx Cup playoffs as the third seed. He'd had an incredible season. He'd won a major. He'd been one of the most consistent players on tour. But then he had 3 bad weeks in the playoffs. Just 3 weeks. And when it was all over, he finished around 25th in the final standings. Morikawa didn't play badly because he suddenly forgot how to golf. He just had a few bad weeks. It happens to everyone. But in the current system, and in Rolapp's proposed system, those 3 weeks erased an entire season of greatness. Fitzpatrick called it weird. He said it didn't feel like a fair way to determine the best player. And he said that if Rolapp's plan was going to make the playoffs even smaller, with even more weight placed on a handful of events, then the problem would only get worse. That was the first domino to fall. Fitzpatrick's comments gave other players the courage to speak out. Then another major champion stepped forward. Lucas Glover didn't just criticize the plan, he called Rolapp's explanation insulting. Lucas Glover won the US Open in 2009. He's been on the PGA Tour for nearly 2 decades. He's seen commissioners come and go. He's seen reforms succeed and fail. And when he heard Rolapp's justification for the changes, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Rolapp had explained that the tour needed to reduce field sizes to speed up play, but Glover knew that was a cover. He knew that field sizes were the same as they'd been for years. He knew that pace of play complaints were nothing new. And he knew that cutting events wasn't about pace of play, it was about creating artificial scarcity. Glover called the explanation insulting. He said players weren't stupid. They could see what was happening. And he said that if the tour was going to make massive changes, they should at least be honest about why. That was a critical moment. Because Glover is a veteran. He's not a young player trying to make a name for himself. He's someone who has earned the right to speak. And when he called the leadership insulting, other veterans started to nod their heads. But the most explosive criticism came from Justin Thomas. And the question he asked was so simple, so devastating, that nobody in the room could answer it. Justin Thomas is one of the most outspoken players in golf. He's won 2 PGA championships. He's been a world #1. And when he speaks, people listen. So when Thomas started talking about the reforms, not just about the field sizes, but about the underlying philosophy, everyone paid attention. Thomas didn't just criticize Rolapp's plan. He asked a fundamental question about the direction of the sport. He wanted to know why the governing bodies were so determined to make the game harder, tougher, more punishing. He wanted to know what kind of message that sent to the next generation of players. And he asked the question that nobody could answer. If the goal is to make the game harder, where does it end? Shane Lowry, the 2019 Open champion, took a different approach. He didn't attack the plan outright. Instead, he expressed something more subtle: concern. Lowry was cautious. He said he wanted to see the details. He said he understood why changes were needed. But he also said that players need to be consulted, that they need to feel like they have a voice in the process. Lowry's position is important because it shows that even players who support the idea of reform have deep reservations about the way it's being handled. It's not just about the changes themselves, it's about the process. It's about respect. And right now, many players feel like they're being treated like pieces on a chessboard rather than partners in the sport. Then came Scottie Scheffler, the world #1, the man who has dominated golf for years. His silence was louder than anyone else's words. until he decided to break it. Scottie Scheffler has been the most dominant player in the world. He's won 4 majors. He's been world number 1 longer than anyone since Tiger Woods. He's not someone who chases headlines or speaks out often. He's measured, he's calm, and when he does speak, everyone listens. Scheffler has played in events that could be affected by the 2-tier system. He's seen the pressure that players are under. He's seen the importance of having choice and flexibility in your schedule, and he's made it clear that any reform should preserve that choice, not take it away. Scheffler's position is significant because he's not fighting for himself. He'll always be in the top tier. He'll always have access to the best events, but he's fighting for the other players, the ones who don't have his status, the ones who need the freedom to play where they want. That's leadership, and it shows that the divide isn't just between players and management. It's also about protecting the future of the sport. European players like Tommy Fleetwood and Bob McIntyre are watching closely. Fleetwood has spoken about the importance of the Scottish Open in his own career. He's played it every year since he turned pro. He knows that without it, his path to the Open Championship would be harder. McIntyre, a Scot, is even more direct. He's called the Scottish Open his favorite tournament. He said that relegating it to a second-tier event would be a tragedy. And he's made it clear that he supports McIlroy's stance. These aren't just players complaining about a minor change. These are major champions, Ryder Cup stars, world-class players who have earned the right to be heard. And they're all saying the same thing. This plan was designed without them, and it shows. 7 players have spoken out so far. 7 different voices, 7 different stories, and all of them lead to the same question. What happens when the best players in the world stop trusting the people who run the sport? The tension is real, and it's building with every passing day. What started as McIlroy standing alone has now become a movement, and the players aren't just venting privately anymore. They're speaking publicly, knowing full well that every word is being dissected by the media and the tour executives. That takes real courage. That question is bigger than the Scottish Open, bigger than Brian Rolapp, bigger than the 2028 postseason meeting. It's about the soul of professional golf. For decades, the PGA Tour has been player-driven. The players owned the tour. They had a say in its direction. They felt like partners. But in the last few years, that partnership has been eroding. The Live Golf war created a rift. The pursuit of television money created new pressures. And now, this reform has created something else, a rebellion. Rory McIlroy didn't boycott the meeting because he wants to be the center of attention. He boycotted it because he believes the process is broken. He believes that the players deserve a real seat at the table, not a vote on a final plan they had no hand in creating. And he's right. The players who have spoken out, Fitzpatrick, Glover, Thomas, Lowry, Scheffler, Fleetwood, McIntyre, they're not troublemakers. They're not trying to destroy the tour. They're fighting for something that matters, a future where players have a voice, where tradition is honored, and where the sport remains fair. Brian Rolapp might see the 2-tier system as a smart business move. He might see the postseason meeting as a necessary step toward a brighter future. But he's missing something fundamental. Golf isn't just a product. It's a community. And when you treat the community like a product, the community pushes back. That's exactly what's happening now. If the world number 2 is willing to risk his membership to make a point, this isn't just a disagreement. This is a warning shot. And the tour needs to decide, are they going to listen or are they going to push forward and watch the rebellion grow? The 2028 postseason is still 2 years away, but the battle lines are already drawn. On one side, Brian Rolapp and the board, the business people who believe they know what's best for the sport. On the other side, the players, the people who actually play the game, who understand its soul, and who aren't willing to watch it be sold off piece by piece. Rory McIlroy has made his position clear. He won't be silenced, he won't be pushed around, and he won't attend a meeting that he believes is designed to railroad the players. Now the question is, will other players follow his lead? Will they also say no? And if enough of them do, what happens to Rolapp's grand plan? This story is far from over. The 2028 postseason is the deadline. But the real timeline is already ticking, because every day that passes, the divide grows wider. Every day that passes, more players are picking up the phone, calling each other and asking the same question, are we going to stand together? Rory McIlroy stood up first, but he won't be the last. Personally, I think Rory made the right call. If the leadership won't listen, you have to force them to. Do you agree, or do you think he should have gone to the meeting and fought from inside? Drop it below. And if you want to know what happens next in this war for the soul of the PGA Tour, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter.